How's it, everybody? Welcome to Season 2 of Exponential Africa Live, a weekly live show that focuses on bringing the best thought leadership, technology and innovation to the African continent and the world. We really believe in the concept of scalable learning and being able to learn new concepts and subjects to expand the mind and evolve as a species. And that is why we must keep an open mind to learning, because once a mind is stretched by a new idea, it never returns to its original dimensions, as Ralph Waldo Emerson would always say. The pandemic has been trying and testing in all our lives, and our goal during this time has been to serve as much value and learning to our community and audiences online, and to keep everyone together during this time. Over the last 8 episodes, we have shared some amazing news around the latest exponential technologies, from energy made in Africa, to the changing face of AI, to human mobility, big data and IoT, parenting and lifelong learning, investing in disruptive innovation, digital health, and tonight in our Season 2 finale with the wonder of space. Our mission as Singularity U South Africa and Man-Made is to help future-proof Africa by building a global community of change makers who can help solve some of Africa's and the world's greatest challenges. We do this through various educational experiences that educate, empower, and inspire, and by building our community and network. The Singularity U South Africa Summit is only 3 weeks away, and we are so excited to have already announced over 80 incredible speakers, with more to be announced soon, and the full schedule. People still need to come together to learn, unlearn, upgrade, and connect. The SUSA Summit will take place on the 14th and 15th of October. However, you will have full access to the platform for 4 days from the 13th to the 16th of October to make sure we allow for networking time and deal making. We want to make sure that you dress up because you're going to be keeping your camera on and connecting with many people at the summit. Every week we give away 3 online tickets, and this week is your last week to get those tickets. So make sure to register and stay tuned for our Share the Tech Love later. Tonight we're going to be talking about Space Baby, from looking up at the stars and wondering if there's life in the universe, to manufacturing off planets with zero-gravity 3D printers. Space has always been one of the most fascinating adventures and discoveries in human existence. The allure of the unknown intrigues us as human beings, and we want to adventure and discover new frontiers. The future of space flight will lead us to off-planet vacations and eventually humans on Mars. On the show tonight we have Ruvimbo Samanga, who's the top talents under 25, as well as a founder at AgriSpace. Jason Dunn, co-founder of Made in Space and Singularity University faculty on space. And Adriana Marais, founder of Proudly Human and Singularity U South Africa faculty of space and quantum physics. A very special thanks to our sponsor partners, our collaboration partner, the Development Bank of Southern Africa, our global partner Deloitte, and our strategic partner MTN. Thank you for your ongoing commitment and dedication to making a positive impact in South Africa and Africa. We wanted to say thanks for all the amazing feedback and comments during the show over the last few weeks. We've had some amazing feedback, and we really appreciate and are grateful to all of you that have watched the show and have given us amazing comments about what you are enjoying and what you would like to see in the future. And lastly, if you want to keep learning about exponential technologies and thought leadership, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube page, click the bell to get notified when we go live, and register on the website to be eligible for giveaways. Let's get started and hear the latest news. China seems as invested in space as ever. Their largest defense contractor is building a floating spaceport to launch its rockets off the coast of the city of Hayang. Not only will smaller rockets launch from there, but building and maintenance of all spacecrafts will also take place on the floating port. Meanwhile, the West is planning all sorts of entertainment in space. A US-based media company, Space Hero Inc., has developed a concept that plans to film a TV series in space. The stakes are high because the winner gets a tour alongside astronauts of none other than the International Space Station. Estee Lauder has also jumped on board by planning an advertising campaign that is literally out of this world. Their skin serum is all set to have footage and photographs taken on board the space station. NASA astronauts will film the product in the microgravity environment of the ISS. Now here's a noteworthy accomplishment from NASA. They're testing a new way to safely land on the moon. Their brand new system looks set to make Moon and Mars landing safer. They plan to run tests on the next mission. It's reported that they're combining laser sensors, a camera, a high-speed computer, and some sophisticated algorithms to achieve this goal. They're also claiming to have found fresh ice on Saturn's moon. This was stumbled upon 3 years after the Cassini spacecraft met its demise. But its 13 years of exploration of Saturn's moons did not go to waste. NASA scientists have gone through detailed infrared images of Saturn's moon. The conclusion? That there's strong evidence of fresh ice in the moon's northern hemisphere. And speaking of potential, Venus currently has all eyes on it, as Nature Astronomy recently reported that a molecule in its atmosphere has a potential signature of life. And in other news that's not space-related, but is still out of this world, doctors are preparing to implant the world's first human bionic eye. Researchers from Monash University in Melbourne claim to have built a bionic device that restores vision to the blind through a brain implant. They are currently preparing for the world's first human clinical trials of their bionic eye. Space already has and will play an even bigger role in all of our lives in the future. That's why discussing, studying, and exploring space is so relevant to all of us as a society. We had the privilege of meeting Jonathan Dunn in 2017 when he entered the SUSA Global Impact Challenge in South Africa. His ideas and passion were astounding to us, and he automatically won the competition. We then sent him to Singularity University in Silicon Valley for the GSP 2017, which is where he met his co-founder, Zachary Leferi. Together, they started Hypernova Space Technologies, working on incredible new ways of making cost-effective rocket fuel. You see, every rocket that's been launched into space so far has used exotic, flammable, toxic, expensive, and rare fuels. And in order to ensure that our explorations, colonizations, and industries in space are achievable in the future, we need to ensure that the fuel is sustainable. And therefore, we will need to be using different materials and resources to what we've traditionally used. So essentially, Hypernova is building technology that allows satellites to move around in space using nothing but ordinary metal as fuel. They are utilizing resources that are readily available and sometimes not that valuable, and turning it into the backbone of what could be a transport infrastructure for exploring the solar system. The possibilities become endless as it opens up the reuse of space junk and the mining of asteroids. The duo is planning on taking the technology that works and packaging it into a commercial format. Small enough to fit in a very, very small satellite, cheap enough to be sold commercially, reliable and efficient to the entire space industry. We look forward to seeing what this duo can accomplish, and we'll be following their progress online and in space. Time to move on to the main part of tonight's show. Let's talk about space, baby. That's about as far as I can go with the singing. We're going to focus on the various innovations and advances in the space ecosystem and what we can look forward to in the future, from manufacturing to travel to self-preservation. Tonight on the show, as I mentioned, we have Ruvimbo Samanga, Jason Dunn, and Adriana Marais. Let's start with Ruvimbo Samanga. Ruvimbo Samanga is from the city of Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, where she attended her primary and secondary education. She's a graduate of law from the University of Pretoria, as well as a member of the Space Generation Advisory Council of the United Nations. Ruvimbo joined at the age of 23 the SGAC, which is a global non-governmental, non-profit organization and network which aims to represent university students and young space professionals to the United Nations, space agencies, industry, and academia. Ruvimbo is also involved in the Women in Aerospace Committee, Africa chapter, and most recently she's dipped her feet in the space law career field and has participated as a delegate and presented a paper titled Lunar Ethics and the Implication of Resource Mining in Outer Space. Ruvimbo, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Hi, Meg. Thank you for having me. Very well, thanks. How are you?
Very good. So you are joining us from Bulawayo, is that right?
Yes, I am, the city of kings and queens.
Awesome, man. And from your bio there, it seems like you're quite a busy individual. And I mean, you're doing some amazing things and being rated as a top tech talent under 25. What's exciting you? What are you up to these days?
Wow, I could speak about a lot, but in a nutshell, I'm very enthusiastic about space. I work as a space law and policy analyst, so I lend my support to different development initiatives on the continent that aim to increase whether it's technological capacity, and most importantly, capacity as well. I think one of my most interesting projects include the first Pan-African satellite initiative will be set done in collaboration with a couple of my colleagues from the Space Generation Advisory Council. As you have already mentioned,
sorry, Ruvimbo, sorry to cut you off there. I think what we're having a bit of a technical issue there. Let me come back to you, and I will. Let's move on to Jason Dunn, and we'll come back to you. We just want to sort out your connection there. So let me move on to Jason Dunn. Jason Dunn is the co-founder of Made in Space and Singularity Faculty of Space and Manufacturing, Additive Manufacturing. Jason Dunn is an international pioneer in the fields of commercial space, digital manufacturing, and disruptive technologies. In 2014, he was recognized by Forbes on the prestigious 30 Under 30 list. Jason which is best known for being the first organization to manufacture off-Earth with Made in Space. Since conception, Made in Space has led the aerospace industry in leveraging space manufacturing technology to enable new space missions. Dunn believes that to solve the world's biggest problems, we must break free from the limits to growth found on our finite planet and move humanity's footprint into space. Jason, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey, Mick. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. It looks like you're in quite a sunny environment. Where are you in the world at the moment?
I'm at my home in Los Angeles, so it's about 8:15 in the morning here, and the sun's just coming up.
That's so cool. And how has the fires passed? Are they over? Have they gone now?
Yeah, thanks for asking. We've been fortunate; it hasn't been bad here, but we definitely are pretty close to some of these fires that you see in the news right now. So it's part of life here and something we're always prepared for.
And I mean, Jason, I don't think many people don't know exactly what Made in Space is, and some of the incredible achievements that you guys have done over the years. What is Made in Space, and do you want to just share with us a bit on your origin story?
Yeah, sure. So Made in Space celebrated our 10-year anniversary last month. So we're quite proud of ourselves that we could, have a aerospace company, get started and be this successful. We started the business 10 years ago. Me and my founders met at Singularity University in the graduate summer program in 2010. What we kind of came together with was this notion that, and a belief that when we look forward into the future of space travel, space industry, space settlement, it's really hard to imagine a future where you don't have manufacturing in space. If you have millions of people living in space, you must be making things there. If you have giant, space hotels, you must be making them in space. So we decided to start working on the technology for space manufacturing, and it wasn't there wasn't too much work that had been done there yet. So we had to kind of pick up new. Fortunately, we saw where 3D printing was headed and advanced robotics, and we started developing new types of ways to do 3D printing in space, in zero gravity, ways to do manufacturing and assembly with robotics, so that you could assemble items. And where this all has led is, we've done some achievements that we're quite proud of, like putting the 3D printers on the International Space Station, which are being used by astronauts. And then our flagship project and mission is a technology called Archinaut, and it's literally a spacecraft that can manufacture itself in space and robotically assemble itself. And this allows us to launch a small satellite inside of a rocket and then have it construct parts of itself in space that would be far too big to have put into the rocket itself. So an example of that would be a very large solar array or an antenna that is too big to fit into the rocket. And so Archinaut is the beginning of our technology to start developing these kind of advanced robotics in space that can do manufacturing and assembly.
I just think it's just absolutely mind-blowing. I don't think people realize how groundbreaking these technologies and what you guys have been doing. I mean, I was following the Archinaut project that you've been working on, and that's, I mean, that is going to be a real game changer for manufacturing off-planet. I also love I've heard you speak before around how the astronauts have like this magic box on the ISS, and your office runs from Earth, right? And they order something, and then they get the spoon. How does that work?
Yeah, and I apologize for this lighting. It's, you know, we practiced and it looked good, and now the moment we start talking, the sun changes its angle. It's just proof that we're in space ourselves, rotating around the sun. So yeah, you know, I'm glad you brought up the magic box idea. That, you know, that's the best way I've always been able to describe the 3D printer in the space station, because the astronauts are, you know, they are very busy. They're constantly doing work, and they don't have much time to play with a 3D printer. So if anybody watching this has ever played with a 3D printer, you know that it takes quite a bit of work to make it operate, make it print the thing you want it to print. We actually have to do all of that from our ground station on Earth and let the astronauts simply float up to the box, open the door, reach inside, and take out whatever it is that was printed. So, and we didn't think of this in the beginning, but after watching the astronauts use the 3D printer many times, what we saw was this amazement that every time they left the 3D printer, it was an empty box. And then every time they came back to the 3D printer and opened the door, there was magically something inside. So I started calling it the magic box, because they never knew what would be inside. And it was always a surprise. And probably the best story of all of this was, it was one of the very first prints that we ever did. The astronaut operating the printer, Butch Wilmore, he actually had mentioned that he was missing a tool. It was a ratcheting wrench. And we went ahead and 3D printed that tool and had it inside of the 3D printer. So about a few days after he had mentioned that the tool was missing, he opened the door and inside was the tool. And I think that speaks to the power of what 3D printing is capable of, not just in space, but really anywhere.
It's just incredible. Yeah, we're going to come back to that in a bit. Let's welcome our next guest onto the show, who is Adriana Marais, founder of Proudly Human and Singularity South Africa Faculty on Quantum Physics and Space. Dr. Adriana Marais, theoretical physicist, technologist, and aspiring extraterrestrial, believes that we are living at a unique point in the history of life on Earth. Developments in engineering and science are taking place at an unprecedented rate, and the expansion of our society beyond this planet is within reach. Early in 2021, Adriana and the Off-World team will depart for an off-winter, off-world settlement simulation experiment in Antarctica to demonstrate community living and off-grid capabilities, from life support to communication systems, in the harshest and most isolated environment on Earth. Off-World is an initiative of Proudly Human, pioneering new frontiers in research and technology for a sustainable future on Earth, above and beyond. Adriana is the founder of Proudly Human, as well as the director of the Foundation for Space Development, an initiative of which is Africa to Moon, Africa's first mission to the moon to inspire the youth of developing nations, in particular Africa, to reach for the stars through education and science. She is also a member of the South African DHET Ministerial Task Team on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, faculty at Singularity University and Duke Corporate Education, and an astronaut candidate with the Mars One project. Adriana, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Mick. A real pleasure to be here.
Really great to have you. And are you speaking from off grid? Or are you currently in Cape Town?
Yeah, I'm actually currently off grid thanks to a delicate interplay of resource management. I've got my power and my comms working, I hope. So thanks for having me here, and I can explain a bit more about how that relates to space in a minute.
I mean, it sounds really exciting and different what you're doing. I mean, I don't think everyone decides to try to work out how do we survive as a species and how do we get off planet. What exactly are you doing? How is it working, this mission?
So, I mean, to some extent, we've all been training for life in space during 2020 in the various forms of lockdown that we've been experiencing during the pandemic in our various countries. So we'll have to issue certificates to all humans to say you've completed some of the training, the conditions of isolation, confinement, the uncertainty of navigating through an extreme and unknown are some of the things we've been dealing with. So these are the characteristics to some extent of the environments that we'll find off-world. So a bit about my background and how quantum physics relates to space. So I'm a theoretical physicist by training and had the real privilege to sit back for some more than a decade and think about what I found were the most important questions. And one of those was, what is life? And in spite of impressive developments in quantum physics, such that we may enjoy access to a universal quantum computer in the next 5, 10 to 20 years, depending on who you ask, and in spite of our impressive exploration missions, Voyager 1 has left the solar system. How incredible. And in spite of these grand achievements on very small scales, as well as huge beyond our solar system, and indeed, observational missions that are in our galaxy and even further, there's one phenomenon that we haven't quite wrapped our heads around, and that's life. And having gone in depth studying quantum biology, studying life's oldest process, photosynthesis, I can concur that we have not yet answered the question, what is life? We have not really understood who we are, where we come from, and whether we are unique in the universe or not, which I do believe we are not. But exciting developments. Thanks for the update, Mick, on developments, including the detection of phosphine in the atmosphere. We've detected methane on Mars. I'm sure there's a good joke there somewhere. Phosphine on Venus, methane on Mars. Let's continue exploring the solar system because there's surely life out there. Okay, let me work on the rhyming. But it's definitely an exciting time for space. We've got 3 missions en route to Mars this year for the first time in human history. The UAE's Orbital Hope mission, the Chinese rover, the NASA rover. So things are heating up. But what are we going to do when we get there, wherever that may be, an orbital mission around Venus or a settlement on Mars? We've been landing technology on the surface of Mars since the 70s. We don't need a quantum computer to figure out how to get to Mars. What we do need are some creative, yes, with some expertise, but some creativity, some imagination, and some passion, and a lot of hard work to figure out what happens beyond the arrival on the surface of a body. And Mars is really an entry-level place to get to if we are going to consider ourselves a space-faring civilization as a relatively sort of moderate environment and our next-door neighbor planet. So the relationship between the extreme conditions that we're going to find on Mars and certain places like Antarctica and others on Earth, and in general the idea of arriving in a place with no infrastructure and setting up camp are some of the things I've been dealing, including building a wooden and plastic and corrugated sheeting cabin from scratch 1 kilometer away from a road. Yes, that means we carried everything by hand, 2 tons of equipment. This is not the high-tech solution that we're going to take to Mars. It was 2 tons just for 2 people. But the thinking, around the power, the water, the food, the communication systems in a place with no infrastructure are some of the challenges thinking about getting to Mars. But I hope you've also realized while I've been saying this that these are the same challenges that so many of us still face here on Earth. So I believe these challenges can be dealt with in parallel. We need to prepare a resource-efficient system for humans to live on the moon, on Mars, and wherever in the solar system they feel like going to explore. At the same time, we need to invest huge amounts of energy, human energy and time and money, developing the same kinds of resource-efficient systems for all of the billions of people living on Earth. So maybe I haven't answered your question directly, but that's a grand overview of my thinking this crazy year of 2020.
No, I think it's so important what you're doing, because the whole space ecosystem needs, there's so much work to be done on how do we actually survive when we get there. So I think it's hugely important, and we need people like what you're doing to actually evolve and carry on as a species. So thank you. In terms of your mission to Mars, what's happening with that? How's that going?
So, we are really proud as South Africans and humans of a certain individual who's kind of spearheading the Mars program at the moment, and that's South African-born Elon Musk. And even during the pandemic, SpaceX has made impressive developments towards their goals of making humans multiplanetary. So huge congrats to the team at SpaceX for becoming the first private company to launch crew to the space station, and the first launch from the US in almost a decade to space. That's the International Space Station, but this is a really important milestone in terms of developing the capability to launch crew further to the moon and to Mars. And we hope to see the first space flight, Earth orbital mission of the Starship as early as 2021. The first cargo launches to Mars by SpaceX are scheduled for 2022. And if this happens to plan, then Elon Musk has claimed that 2024 could be the date most humans leave from Earth to Mars. So I'm not sure whether I would volunteer to be on the first mission, but certainly within the next decade is a time frame to have in mind when thinking about the various capabilities that we're going to need to have in place. So let me say first that collaboration is the most fundamental requirement to getting anything done in space. So I'm really grateful to be here. Thanks, Mick, and really happy to be here with Jason and Ruvimbo, because it's going to be a combination of highly specific expertise and a collaboration between like-minded people with a common vision for humanity in terms of getting it done. So from my perspective, we'd like to look at arriving in a place with no infrastructure, arriving at the most extreme place that we can think of with no infrastructure, and getting a team to build infrastructure as community spirit, no matter which planet we're on, in mind. So Antarctica, for reasons of the temperature being around -60, -70, when you go inland at altitudes of 3,000 meters, the low pressure, the extreme cold temperatures, as well as dilation, makes Antarctica one of the closest parallel environments to what the first crews will arrive to find on Mars. So our overwinter experiment, due to the unforeseen circumstances of this year, we haven't put a date on it, but we're in the process of preparing for an overwinter expedition to Antarctica, which we'll repeat many times to collect data on, as I've said, the infrastructural requirements, the power, water, food, communication systems, but more importantly, the community spirit that we foster within, not in spite of, but because of these extreme environments. And we believe these are the capabilities that will contribute to the success of the first arrivals on Mars. Given that we get there successfully, go SpaceX, we're looking at building infrastructure teams in extreme environments at the moment.
No, thanks. I think it's really an exciting space. So let's join our other guests. I think we can go back to Ruvimbo and see if you're online. Ruvimbo, how are you doing? Ruvimbo? I think we've lost her again. Well, let's go back to joining with Jason and Adriana while we get Ruvimbo back. Jason, let me ask you, Just building on what Adriana was saying, what is the state of the current space race? Who's winning? What are some of the prizes? You know, how big is this, and who's leading this race?
Well, it's yeah, I don't know how to say who's winning or if it's even a race anymore. I think that, you know, we definitely had a space race when you know, it was Soviets versus US trying to, you know, get to space and then get to the moon, and we had that. You know, now it seems like it's much more of a race between companies, you know, which private launch company will get there first, which private company will build the space hotel. So there could be, maybe you look at it like a race more on the commercial side. That said, we've been paying a lot of attention to China and what China's doing to catch up and be able to, you know, do what the other nations are already able to do in space. And it's been impressive to see China's capabilities. So I would say that we should, you know, expect to see China, you know, continue to gain momentum there, and perhaps even do things before other nations do. Maybe China puts people on the moon next, even faster than the US is claiming. But what excites me is that it's not that, you know, space has kind of moved away from the, you know, just pure national superiority over another nation, and it's much more of a collaboration, much more of a you know, a focus on not just, you know, planting the flag into the soil, but how to be permanent there, how to move people and have a permanent settlement on the moon, whether it's for research like an Antarctica station or perhaps a hotel in the future, and then eventually to Mars and beyond. So I would say, like, you know, we're a little bit beyond this idea of a purely a space race, and it's much more of a, you know, a global push to space, and which should excite you a lot more if you think of it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the idea of collaboration is so important, especially with, if you look at this panel, you've got such varied backgrounds, all sort of aiming towards a similar goal to evolving us in space. Adriana, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. I think when you think about just how complex a system will be required to not just plant the flag on Mars, let's say we have Mars in mind, but to think about all the infrastructure that will be required. And so I think Antarctica is a really interesting, and we can definitely call on the expertise of Ruvimbo in this respect in terms of policy. But I think the technology is tricky, but as I've said, we don't need to wait for a quantum computer to get it done. When we're thinking about power systems, you know, missions to Mars and even out of the solar system have been solar powered for decades. So we can think about creating redundancy in terms of power systems, hydrogen fuel cells that are produced locally by hydrogen containing compounds. We can think about nuclear power as a backup. Perhaps we can think about biofuel production from human waste. And that's just power. Next most important in my mind would be water, from which we extract oxygen. And there are plenty of different components in the system that are going to be required to process wastewater, which is going to be crucial no matter what planet we're on. Our increasing population, coupled with a limited fresh water supply, means that wastewater management is a really crucial aspect of any human settlement anywhere. So I'm not going to go through all the aspects, agriculture, communication systems, but we can really think about optimizing these systems with respect to resource efficiency. And I think then we start to speak to any human settlement, formal settlement, a refugee camp, a base on the moon. You know, the requirements are the same: reliable power production feeding into water, food, and communication systems. Doing research in Antarctica is a particularly attractive part of Earth, both in terms, I think, of the treaty that governs activities there, meaning that Antarctica, if people are trying to get their heads around what life beyond Earth might look like, perhaps Antarctica is a good place to start thinking. It's treaty governed, it's collaboratively operated. The of activity there are towards research and science, and not commercialization. Although when I visited Antarctica last year in December, I did visit one of the few private camps. So we do have to think about commercial activities in the midst of a treaty, sort of direct activities towards cooperative science and research goals. But I think, yeah, one of the greatest aspects of Antarctica in comparison to space, besides it being treaty governed and therefore not subject to the kinds of national conflicts that we see in every other part of the world except Antarctica, probably because there aren't many humans living there, but okay, it's a place to start to think about collaboration in terms of policy. But I think the isolation of Antarctica, so I was there in summer and temperatures were a disappointing sort of 0, and all the gear that I'd brought wasn't really useful at all. But in winter, it's a very different scenario. And in this situation, I'd say even the space station and even the not the same comparison that spending the winter in Antarctica does, because there's no evacuation. You know, if something goes wrong in the space station, it can be a matter of tens of hours to get someone back. The moon, a few days. So when you're on Mars, it's a 7-month trip. When you're in Antarctica, it is a duration of around 7 months that there is no access. So it's a great contribution to data and knowledge, all of the space analog activities that are going on globally. But we feel our activities when we arrive in Antarctica for the winter and set up camp from scratch and iterate this many times in terms of the psychology, which may turn out to be the most critical factor. You know, your power systems, your water, your agri, your comms can be working perfectly, but if your team cohesion is not there, this will lead to mission failure in spite of a perfect technological setup. So manufacturing in Antarctica at -60 is something we are extremely excited to start thinking about in terms of local resources from ice using resins. There are all sorts of exciting things, and what Made in Space has done in the space station has really invigorated for me the idea that 3D printing will be at the heart of any kind of settlement off-world, wherever that may be. So we're super excited to test the technologies, but also to collect data on how to mitigate team issues, but more importantly, how to build community spirit, how to build social cohesion, no matter how extreme the environment. And we hope that in this way, space can also be a real inspiration to people living in hardships on Earth. And we know there are billions of us who live in environments that may be more extreme than the situation the first humans on Mars will face. And I think we think about these in parallel as we try to develop towards this grand achievement of solving poverty on Earth and getting humans to Mars and beyond.
No, thanks for that. I think it's so interesting what you're saying about the mindset, because I've seen maybe a lot of space movies where it really goes wrong when the crew starts turning on each other. And I think there's a huge amount of planning that it just really takes to the next level of planning when you have to plan for 7 months of never getting any resources. I think we've got Ruvimbo back. Ruvimbo, how are you doing? Let's try one more time.
Hi there, Mick. Yes, I just took a quick trip to Mars there.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks for coming back from Mars. Ruvimbo, just, you're doing many things, and I think Adriana touched on it. What are we looking at the policy side of space? What's happening in the policy side and commercializing it more, making it more accessible?
So policy is actually a very big enabling factor of space at the moment, and many people will be very interested to hear that it's all too different really from the policy systems that exist on Earth currently. Really, much of the policy we work in is developmental policy that you would find replicated systems, be it environmental policy, be it commercial policy, contractual policy. All of these policies are really just translated into a lunar setting. But we have a peculiar situation now, especially when it comes to our international law and our international policy, which is the fact that when these different treaties were drafted, they couldn't have envisioned that we would one day go to the moon, or let alone think about staying on the moon or even going beyond the moon and going to Mars. So now lawyers and policymakers have this immense task of trying to adapt the laws in such a way that they appreciate this new understanding and this new interest, but also do so in a way that we preserve outer space as the common heritage of mankind. So Outer space doesn't actually belong to anyone in particular. It belongs to everyone as a whole. And the prevailing concern in policy is really how do we use this resource in a sustainable manner? How do we make sure, especially, that all stakeholders, be they public or private, have an equal share in this resource? And now the task then, especially when it comes to extraplanetary settlement and development, is making sure that it is accessible to each and every single individual, and furthermore, the resource is used in an equitable manner. So currently, as the international law stands, or rather, let me start at a national level, because we have national laws and international laws. Very few countries have, in fact, enacted extraterritorial legislation. The forerunners in this case would be the United States of America, which recently drafted their Artemis Accords. And this is a lunar settlement and development policy framework that looks at really using the moon, investigating the moon, exploring the moon as a sort of analog research towards going to Mars. And now what we have to think about then is, how do you do that in the context of multiple stakeholders? What kind of oversight mechanism would you have, remembering the fact that there is no broad lunar regulatory authority to oversee all of these things? So what would such an institution look like? How would we fund such a mechanism? How would we ensure that the countries or the entities that fund more don't get more access to a certain space? For example, how do we deal with liability? You would be very interested to know that there are very few cases that have actually been tried on the basis of the prevailing international law. For example, the Liability Convention, which was drafted eons ago, has never, not once, had a case draft or brought before the courts in terms of any of its provisions. So clearly, there's some trepidation to actually lay in claims based in treaties, and a lot of countries resort to commercial law, which is not necessarily in the interest of all mankind, and really lends that commercial aspect to outer space, which sometimes, most countries, most entities are trying to steer away of in terms of trying to make it beneficial and accessible. So there are quite a few regulatory loopholes I could talk about. Like I said, the oversight mechanism, the funding mechanism, the liability mechanism, and also the environmental mechanism. What is the impact that going to these different bodies will have? For instance, there are plans that in order to make Mars habitable, of course, there'll have to be a process of terraforming, which is developing or altering the atmosphere in a way to make it more like Earth, to make it more habitable. But we don't necessarily know what the impact of this would be. Or for instance, if we were to mine on the moon, for example, with a big interest now expressed by some countries, some entities, what would the effect of mining on the moon be? I mean, think of the fact that our gravitational pull or our tides are linked to the mass of the moon. Do you per se think that we could mine the moon too much and, alter here on Earth? There's an intersectionality between us and our closest heavenly body, and as well as all the planets in the system that we need to appreciate and acknowledge as a resource, and which has territorial integrity. So there are all of these moral obligations, there are financial obligations, there are legal obligations, and of course there are technical obligations, which of course is what I'm trying to delve into now. Being a lawyer, I do get, I'm very non-technical, and space is a very technical field. So there are different, systems design thinking approaches that you need to think, the supply chain, and really the work that Adriana is doing speaks most to this. And how do we make sure that this supply chain is sustainable, is secure, and is beneficial for all mankind? And that's the benefit, I suppose, of the human settlement experiences, because then we get to test out these policies. We have a test bed that gives us this, a model that we can look at and reasonably infer that this would be the impact. And really, policy at this point is a blank canvas, and it's really up to us now to be forward thinking, look at the disasters of the past concerning new settlements, and try and pave a better way forward rather than being reactive. I think this is the most opportune moment, and I think we've capitalized this moment to be proactive and prepare that policy bed before we go and actually go to the moon or go to Mars. So, and policy making, by the way, is not only a lawyer's job. Space is very interdisciplinary, it's multidisciplinary. We need input from every single stakeholder who can articulate to lawyers what kind of protection they need in their different sectors. And that's exactly where a lawyer come in and we put it in the legal language, but we need all the other industry stakeholders to really explain the nitty-gritties of it. And this is basically what I do in a nutshell. And it's quite interesting to just see all of these different things.
No, thanks so much. People don't realize how evolved and how deep this industry is. Just following on that, Jason, looking at the space station, we've had somebody in space for quite a number of years now. And how many people have gone to the space station? Who's on it? What are they doing every day?
So we've had someone living on the space station over a decade now. Like always, there's always a human life or more in space. The longest we've seen someone stay on the space station is about close to a year, and that mostly was a study on the long-term effects of living in space. What's surprising to most people is that there hasn't been many people who have gone to space. So today there's somewhere around 570 people have ever gone to space since the beginning, since Yuri Gagarin took the first flight about a half a century ago. So that's usually the surprise, is that not many people have gone. But I think if you take all the things that we've been talking about today, you think about going to the moon and doing things like what we do on Antarctica there, or exploring asteroids, or going to Mars, and especially with what's happening with the commercial industry like SpaceX making it easier to go. I'm one to believe that we're about to see the theoretical knee of the curve, where the number of people going into space really starts to increase exponentially. And so today it may only be 570, 600 people, but that doesn't mean that in a few years or in a decade it won't be thousands and thousands of people. No. Your other question was what's happening on the space station. It's mostly research. The space station was designed and built as a collaborative effort among many different countries to really study the effects of living in space. So we use the space station as a test bed for future habitats. Today, NASA is designing habitats for around the moon and on the surface of the moon, and a lot of the technologies and the lessons learned came from the International Space Station that then will be used in those missions. And I'm sure when we go to Mars, it will be very much the same.
No, thanks so much for answering that. And that will lead us into our first questions from our audience. We've got Iga, who's asking, what are the predictions as to when space travel, even if it's just out of the stratosphere, will be financially accessible for the average consumer? She's saving up. Adriana, do you want to answer this, and then we'll get also comments from Ruvimbo?
Sure. So I think in terms of living off planet, this has not yet been done. And one of my visions for the future is that we don't copy-paste the current model by which we do economics on Earth directly onto the moon and Mars and wherever we go from here. So challenging the current economic system on Earth is a difficult thing to do, because those with invested interests in the system also hold power over them. So this is a complex topic that let me not dive into it here. But I believe personally, and this is a model that Proudly Human is implementing, currently, we are trying to set up a way of getting into the space industry without any finances required. So not to say don't keep saving, because going as a space tourist will certainly support all the industries that are operating commercially in the space, and this is great that it grows. But my idea is around the fact that partnerships towards achieving goals don't necessarily need to involve financial transactions. So actually the work I'm doing now towards a second PhD is a data-driven, blockchain-based economic system to manage resources in extreme environments that are also resource constrained. Anyway, the short and sweet of that is that we hope that collaboration and shared be enough to get whoever wants to go off the planet. Now, this doesn't mean you're going to go for a free ride. If you want to go for a ride, you're probably going to have to pay for it. It's probably not going to be free. But if your idea is to invest with your expertise, with your passion, with your curiosity, with your knowledge, to the activities that are happening on Mars and beyond, the moon, I'm not sure, it looks already on the plate as a commercial entity, but let's not get too controversial here towards the end. I believe that collecting personal expertise could be enough to get there. And in fact, I'm currently trying to make myself one of the highly qualified people on the planet to survive on the surface of Mars. So if you're not so sure about that, watch the space. Otherwise, keep saving, and probably others have more direct numbers in mind for you. Virgin Galactic is probably the one to focus on now. But I would say, rack up the expertise, get your passion going, get your curiosity going, and network. And I believe there is a space on an off-world project for you out there.
No, thanks. Igor, I hope that answered your question. We've got quite a number of questions coming through, so I'm going to just field the next question to you, Ruvimbo. It comes from Lee, and she's asking about something that we spoke about, is that recently phosphine was discovered in the atmosphere of Venus as a potential biosignature. This raises a question: if Venusian life exists, could it be related to terrestrial life?
All right, so I think we're getting into a little bit of physics and chemistry here, but from my understanding, it could point, yes, to life, extraplanetary life, not specifically on Venus, but could at least point towards the existence of maybe other planetary bodies that might have more developed life forms. So as far as I understand, and maybe Adriana could help me a little bit here, phosphine is sort of a byproduct which is emitted from small little organisms like bacteria. And of course, bacteria wouldn't necessarily be counted as extraterrestrial life, but seeing the potential of life support on another planet would indicate that there might be some more advanced life on other planets which deserve some investigation. So this is like the gateway in terms of extraterrestrial exploration. It's not so much that we're going to, magically find extraterrestrial life on Venus, but it keeps us going. Humanity is naturally very curious, and seeing this kind of development, I suppose, it sparks that curiosity to look and define or determine what else out there. So in that regard, that there really could be, life on Earth. Imagine the fact that there are hundreds and millions of other galaxies like our own. Our own galaxy has hundreds of other planets which we have yet to investigate. So who knows what is in the out there and beyond. If we can find even that small microorganism in our own galaxy, there might be a more conducive galaxy, a more conducive environment elsewhere, and we use that information and apply it to these other territories to see if there's something out there. And that's where the development of deep space exploration comes in. So indeed, and as Adriana says, there could very well be life out there, and this is just the beginning. As our technology gets more advanced and we dig deeper out there, who knows what we could find.
Thanks. I mean, I always grew up on E.T. Was one of my favorite movies, and I also definitely believe there must be life out there in the universe. I'm going to move over to a question for Jason. It comes from David Roberts, and he's asking Jason, can you say anything about the James Webb Space Telescope? When its launch is planned, how extraordinary will it be?
All right, well, if this is the David Roberts I know, then he loaded the question for me. So yeah, James Webb it's probably one of the most fascinating missions that's been designed ever. It's a it's a monumental achievement in, I think, in engineering. For those of you who don't know, after the Hubble telescope was designed by NASA and launched, then they got back to work designing what would the next very large space telescope be, and it's the James Webb Space Telescope, JWST. It's been in the works for at least 2 decades maybe from design, and now it's completely built and it's getting ready to be launched. I don't know the exact timeline, but we could, anybody watching who's interested could pull that up and see NASA's website for James Webb, but it's pretty soon. What's amazing about James Webb is it's really big. It's probably as big as you could get a telescope to fit into a rocket, and it folds up a lot. So think of like the way umbrellas fold up. It's a very complex set of folds. In fact, for it to unfold itself, it takes about 2 weeks. So the telescope will be located pretty far away from the Earth. It has to fly towards if memory serves me correctly, one of the Lagrange points between Earth and the Moon. Lagrange point is essentially a place where the gravity well of Earth and the gravity well of the Moon meet into this little point where it's a lot easier to stay in that spot in space because you're sitting at the top like a plateau, and on each side you would roll down a hill towards the Earth or towards the Moon. And I think, if memory serves me correctly, JWST goes to one of those points. It takes, for that 2-week journey that it's flying there, it's constantly unfolding different panels and things that shade the telescope from the sun. And it has a set of mirrors made from beryllium that are incredibly difficult to manufacture. Each one is a hexagon, and they hook together just like maybe like a honeycomb would look. And in order to have the imaging capability for the telescope, these mirrors have to be precise with each other within fractions of a millimeter. So imagine, and they're launched folded up, and they have to open up and adjust themselves and then hold their shape within fractions of a millimeter of each other. And this was one of the biggest challenges for the engineering team on the telescope, because it's very, very difficult to launch anything into space that has to hold that type of precision, let alone these very fragile mirrors that have to unfold and connect to themselves. So I think that behind each mirror is an array of piezoelectric motors that all have the ability to make these fine adjustments. And then there's a lot of temperature control, because as the sun heats the spacecraft, it can, if the spacecraft is facing the sun, it could be positive 250 degrees Fahrenheit. If it's seeing the darkness of space, it could be negative 250 degrees Fahrenheit. So there's a huge temperature difference, and that temperature difference can change the shape of those mirrors and the shape of the spacecraft. So incredibly difficult mission, but once it's successful, it will help us look further into the universe than we've ever looked, explore further than we've ever explored. And going back to maybe some of what Ruvimbo was just talking about, if what we just learned about Venus taught us anything, it's that we should start looking more and more for places that could harbor life. And I think that's one of the hopes with JWST, is the ability to do just that.
No, thanks so much for that question, David, and for that answer. We are running out of time, and we're getting quite a number of questions coming through. So I'm just going to shoot to the next question. Ruvimbo, if you want to answer this first, and then we can move over to Adriana, which is, what are your thoughts on projects regarding nanosat, CubeSat in agri-tech in the next development in space, especially in Mars And if you could please just keep it brief, because we are almost out of time.
Okay, so I think we're right in my area of expertise. I'm a big fan of nanosatellite, cube satellites, or for Mars, cube rovers, which are basically miniaturized space equipment. I think the future of these are very bright. If you look at already how the satellite industry has been impacted by this nanosatellite technology, it's cheap, it's efficient, it's accessible, and it really offers both government and private entities and even university students, who are sometimes the biggest developers of these technologies. It gives them an opportunity to tap into the space industry, and you'll find even in the African space industry and the global space industry in general, the small sat, CubeSat, nanosatellite technology is actually the largest market, owing to those favorable factors that I've mentioned already. So I definitely see a big potential, especially of this nanosatellite cube rover technology on Mars, because it just offers a more accessible way of reaching these spaces, and allows us to develop technologies at a small scale and give us that room to sing on the peculiar challenges or opportunities that arise when we do arrive in that terrain.
Thanks for that. Adriana, do you want to comment on that as well?
Yeah, thanks. So luckily we have a chance to mention the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope, because no space panel, including discussions on Africa, would be complete without it. So we should all be really proud as South Africans to be hosting a large component of the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope under construction here in the Northern Cape. So the Meerkat precursor array is already producing images, including the most highly resolved image of the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which is creating publishable science in all corners of conferences that I've been to. I've seen this image, beautiful. Just check it out, the Meerkat image of the center of the Milky Way. But importantly, this project with respect to ground stations and the capabilities that developing countries have to, as we've heard Ruvimbo say, for many applications, including agriculture. I think what the SKA is demonstrating is also the power of having ground stations and looking at the legacy of the SKA project already before it's complete is the number of bursaries given, the increase in productivity or in matric levers marks, let's say, in these regions that have been by funding through the telescope in the regions where this technology is being built. There are eight African nation partner states where receivers are being built, and these become hubs of not only research activities but also infrastructure for computing, databasing, communication systems, etc. So that's a fantastic project that I think everyone should celebrate who's on the continent and on the planet. I have to mention one thing.
We will wait to hear what that one thing is. I think Adriana just cut out. she's off the grid, so I'm sure she'll be. Oh, there she's back.
Planning and assessment. Nano prospectors to go and check out the asteroid belt are what we're going to need for manufacturing on Mars. And if Earth doesn't do it first, we'll do it first from Mars. I won't go on anymore on that incredible topic.
No, thanks. What actually happened is your video got stuck there for a second. So you had frozen, as you said one thing, and then you froze. It was like that movie City Slickers. But thanks so much for that. I'm going to just try to get to one or two more questions, just even though we are over time. This is from Sharat Akhraya. Jason, if you want to answer this one, who's asking, what about Russian claim of Venus? No longer confined to territories here on Earth, Russia has now staked its claim on Venus, saying it's a Russian planet. How does that work?
I don't know. Maybe somebody else should speak to this one. I haven't heard that yet. I haven't heard that. But I think Ruvimbo was mentioning a lot more about, how this, like the Outer Space Treaty works. My
Ruvimbo,
understanding.
What are your thoughts? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'd rather hear Ruvimbo. There's no way I could be an expert on this topic.
Well, I mean, I heard the news, but I can assure you that in terms of the international treaty, that is not possible. Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty provides the non appropriation principle, which again restates that no extraplanetary body, whether that's the moon or any planet or even an asteroid, belongs to any one nation or any one person in particular. So Russia cannot indeed claim sovereignty over Venus, as justified as it may seem.
Thanks for
You know,
sorting out
it
that one.
probably it might not be an issue if they take Venus, though. It's pretty inhospitable. I don't know what you would want to do. What you'd want to do with Venus? It's like 900 degrees on the surface. Wouldn't be that much fun to go there.
Sounds like fake
If anyone's
news.
claiming Venus, it's woman, isn't it?
And okay, then let's move on to another question. We've got a question from Melissa, my wife, who is currently online here, who's asking for Adriana, will we be able to follow your expedition in Antarctica somehow?
Certainly. So I think a massive role, whether you're in the space station or doing research on extremophiles and volcanoes, I think space and Earth-based towards space operations are just really inspiring to people. And we do hope to have a large aspect of our interacting with the public through a documentary series. So as well as generating data. So I hope to generate a lot of good footage that people will be able to watch. Not so much of the drama-based things that we might be used to from Hollywood, because a lack of drama is definitely what you're aiming for when you're in an extreme environment. And I went to Antarctica with the documentary crew, and they were disappointed with the lack of drama. And I said, well, this is definitely a good thing, and this will characterize the show. Not to say interesting stuff will happen, but most certainly, yeah.
No, thanks for that. We've got a question here for Jason from Andrew, who's asking, what is the future of farming in space?
Okay, I'll give you this is what I believe is probably the far future. So extrapolate to this point however you want. What I'm fascinated by is that we can build these very large settlements in space, call them space stations, but they'd be the size of a city, and they would orbit the Earth, or they would orbit the sun in the same orbit pattern as the Earth. But they're essentially very easy to get to from Earth to these places. And what's unique about them is if you imagine like a long cylinder rotating on its long axis, if it rotates just right, it will create gravity on the inside surface of that cylinder. Now, imagine something that's maybe a couple kilometers across in diameter. So it's a very large cylinder in space. It's rotating very slowly, but it would have gravity on the inside. It could have the same exact gravity we have here on Earth. And then by directing the sunlight into that cylinder, you can control the lighting conditions, you can control the temperature, the environment, and we can grow plants inside of these cylinders. We can literally have rivers of water and waterfalls, and it would look very much like Earth, perhaps inside out. You would stand on the surface of this inside of the cylinder and look up and see the other surface on the other side, and you could walk around circumferentially around that cylinder. This is how I think we'll have people living in space in the future, because it's infinite amount of these could be built. They could be put anywhere. So as humanity expands, we don't have to exploit the surface of another planet to do that. Now, where it comes back to farming in space is I think this is a really unique place to do farming. And the reason why is you can remove all of the bad parts of farming that we are currently using pesticides for and making GMO plants for to survive in different conditions on Earth. When we build one of these, we could build one that's essentially just a farm and never have a bad bug inside of this space farm at all. And then there would be no reason to spray the plants with pesticide. and you can control the amount of sun that you get. The length of a day can always be, 12 hours of sunlight, 12 hours of darkness, and it can be the exact temperature conditions that you need for growing. You could mimic, the exact spot on Earth that you used to grow the tomatoes. Now you grow them here in the exact same condition. So it would be a very controlled and very ideal place to do farming. And as soon as the transportation cost is low enough, I think transportation costs would have to be low enough to build one of these. So assuming that happens, then it should be easy to transport the produce back to Earth, and you could feed the population of Earth with produce that is farmed in space in a much healthier way than we're farming on Earth, without exploiting Earth's resources to do it.
No, I think that's so interesting. I've heard you talk a lot about that, how by doing manufacturing and farming in space, we're actually taking a lot of the pressure off of how we're ruining our own planet on Earth. And there's no need to constantly be doing this on Earth if you can do it in space. This has been such an exciting panel. We could be talking about this for hours. I just want to do some closing remarks from each of you. If you can, just some brief closing remarks on how people can get more involved in this industry. How can they, as a company organization, embrace it or try to work out how to commercially get involved. Let's start with Ruvimbo, then go to Adriana, and we'll end with you, Jason. Just some closing comments from each of you, please.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I have such a passion for the youth. I especially want to appeal to them today and just encourage them to get interested in space. There are lots of resources online, lots of organizations that speak to the space sciences. I, for one, am a part of the Space Generation Advisory Council, and membership is free. All you have to do is sign up, and you have a plethora of opportunities, scholarships, competitions, all sorts of engagements open to you that really immerse you as a young professional into the space field. And I think generally, whether it's an organization or an individual, I encourage you to be forward-thinking, to attach yourselves to really anyone who is involved in space, especially lawyers who can help companies navigate this new and exciting terrain. And definitely just keep your eyes on the developments that are happening right now and see how you can fit yourself in. This industry is one of the future critical industries, and you definitely don't want to miss out on this one.
No, thanks for that. Adriana, some closing comments from you. Well, what's exciting you? How do people get involved?
Yeah, so thanks so much, Mick, and it's been a fantastic discussion this afternoon. I think we're facing a lot of challenges as a society. I'm not going to list them all, but I think we're aware of them. We've been watching too much news this year. But I believe they can be boiled down to a single issue, and that's poor resource management. We have not mastered the art of managing our resources. It's not about overpopulation. It's not only about the species extinction event we're causing. It's not only about the climate change we're inducing. All of these boil down, in my mind, to a lack of expertise in managing our resources. So, this is not a greatly inspiring challenge to pass on to the youth. So I think thinking about solving these challenges in space, thinking about how we can solve power access, how we can solve agriculture, how we can solve wastewater management on the surface is a particularly exciting and inspiring way to think about how we can also roll these kinds of solutions out on Earth. So for me, resource management is the name of the game. Thinking about doing this on Mars is really like the height of expertise that we're going to require, and all of the ideas that we have will feed back into the Earth system. So I think, focusing on power, water, food, and communication systems, whatever planet we're on, is really at the core of what we need to develop through technology and through a passion for, inspiring each other, being curious, and improving living conditions for humans wherever they are. So proudlyhuman.com is where you can learn more about our stuff. And before the Antarctica documentary comes out, we've got our new YouTube channel for Proudly Human, so check it out. Proudly Human is a collaborative platform where we hope to bring on board many other partners in the space. So we're here to encourage each and every player in the game. So such a pleasure to be part of the panel, such a pleasure to be part of the space industry. And yeah, we look forward to a proud future, whatever planet we're on, through the collaboration of all humans. And thanks so much, Mick, for including me today.
No, thanks so much for that. I think we'll definitely put your website URL in the chat if anyone wants to go there. And that is a great way to get involved if you're a corporate or an organization. Just go to proudlyhuman.com and I'm sure you can reach out to Adriana there. Jason, over to you for some closing comments.
Sure. So, yeah, I think the general point I would make is no matter, why you called in today, what your interest is, whether it's an individual interest, maybe you're a corporate, trying to understand how space relates to your business. Maybe you're an entrepreneur interested in starting a space company. The one point I would make is space is very much a part of our lives. You're in space right now. You're literally in space right now. You're on a very big spaceship called Earth that is flying through space. And everything about our lives exists because of, this interaction we have with space, between the sun and the moon and the stars. If you're just generally interested in space and you want to know how to be more, involved, I would, easy things to do are, download an app that lets you understand the stars. And, I use an app like every night I go out and use the Sky Map app and look up and figure out what the stars are and learn your constellations, figure out how to spot them in the sky, and understand where the planets are each night, and the phases of the moon. And these are things that just connect you to space the way our ancestors always were. And it's very natural, and it's something that we can all be a part of. If you're an entrepreneur, an investor, a corporate entity, space it's booming. This is we're about to see commercial space flight, people going into space, suborbital and then eventually orbital. That's happening right now with a few different companies. We have space tourism, that's going to lead to space hotels. There's space manufacturing, companies like Made in Space moving industry into space to alleviate industry on Earth. We're going to see resource extraction from asteroids. These are like real things happening today. And it's now is the time to get invested into it, to whether it's start your own company, find out how your large corporation can be a part of it, or invest into it as an investor. There's a lot of opportunities to do that. And this is a place where there's going to be huge returns in the next 5 to 10 years and beyond. So it's not too late to get in. It's a perfect time to get in, and there's a way for you to do it. I guarantee it. So thanks for having me. This was really a fun way to start my day.
No, thanks for joining, and thanks to all of you for this incredible, amazing panel where you guys are really all out of this world, and we are grateful that you are pushing and evolving the human species, and for sharing your insights and views with us today. So thank you all so much. To the rest of the audience, don't go anywhere. Our giveaways are up next. Tonight we're giving away 3 Ultra Experience tickets to the Singularity U South Africa Summit Online 2020, valued at 10,000 Rand per ticket, which includes the 4 days of access to the SUSA Summit Online platform, as well as unique experiences during the summit. Let's draw our winners. For the last time, Perrin, please spin the randomizer. And our 3 winners are Sipokaze Mate, Leanne Hasselbach, and Adrian Oberhazer. Well done to you guys. You've won an Ultra Experience ticket to this upcoming summit. And that's all, folks. That's all we have for Season 2 of Exponential Africa Live. Please reach out to us with your ideas for next season on topics you want us to cover. We are also so excited for the upcoming SUSA Summit Online on the 14th and 15th of October. You can go to the website to buy tickets and make sure to meet some new people, especially after this lockdown. The show has been a mammoth task to put together, especially during the pandemic, and we've had our fair share of it, let me tell you. But the show carried on, and it's been an honor and a privilege working with our team at Mann over the last 6 months on season 1 and season 2. I really love this quote from Margaret Mead, who said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." So thanks to our team. Let's actually call everyone who's here up for the shot. Perrin, Brad, Andile, Tamsin, Bianca. This is some of the team guys that have put this together, that are here. So thanks to everyone here. Brad, did we see you? No, he already jumped out. So yeah, thanks to the whole team. It's been really incredible. And thanks to the rest of the team that is at home or online working remotely. We will be back for season 3 of Exponential Africa Live soon. Make sure to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. I'm Mann. Let's future-proof Africa together and keep smiling.